work through data management. Let's leave data governance. I think the scrolling is also not working in sync with data governance. So it is also too scared to work with data governance. So yeah. So these are certain questions which I thought about, and I believe I have seen these being asked to me. So I thought, let me ask, inquire how many of you have heard of these questions in your past experience or in your interactions so far. So for example, can you describe your company's data health? How will you measure it? So these are very, very simple, basic questions, but too technical sometimes to understand and interpret it. So even for audits or any regulatory reporting pieces, these are very, very important questions. And so, for example, it could vary for one department as well as for one line of business as compared to the whole organization. So how we are going to achieve it is basically how we understand our data. So it could be for a sales team, it could be its revenues, its sales, and then the profit, what is driving them. And then how confident are you those numbers are accurate, in the sense how much of an effort a data analyst behind is spending or to correct those numbers which is coming out of your systems. Are there manual interventions? Are they able to find those numbers accurately? If another analyst will work on similar data, will they be able to come up with the same number without any manual intervention or any system fixes? So those kind of questions will keep on coming up with your line of business as well as for your organization. So that is where the importance of data management comes into picture. So assessing the data integrity and reliability is crucial to maintain trust and compliance. So this is pretty common across both on the regulatory front. For an organization, it could be a big bank, it could be a big oil and gas company, it could be a small sales teams also, or a marketing team as well, in the sense if you have to manage your data privacy, if you have to manage customer records, it is very, very critical that you are able to ensure the data integrity and reliability. So that comes into picture. Then there are two aspects to data management. One is reactive, one is proactive. So when I say reactive would be the one that the firm is being asked to maintain, or firm is being asked to meet the certain standards, certain regulatory requirements, or mitigate this risk. So those will be reactive, which the firm is being asked to achieve or maintain to be able to be sustainable in the market. And whereas the proactive ones will be how you improve your return on investments, how you are able to manage productivity or reduce costs. So those becomes your proactive means to achieve data management. And these are done through active data governance piece. So ultimately it lies to what fits your purpose, basically. So for every firm, whether it is a small or a large firm, it will ultimately drive what fits its purpose. So ultimately fit for purpose would be to have access to accurate, reliable data. In the sense, every firm needs a data which is accurate, reliable, and if we manage this data basically through the guidelines and policies, and that is where data governance comes into picture, you will ensure that it is accurate and accessible, and it makes it fit for purpose. So this will enhance. So once you manage the data through fit for purpose governance, it will be basically help us to it will improve our decision-making abilities. It will improve our protection on privacy, compliance, and regulation, as well as efficiency. So that is how the fit-for-purpose data works. And again, it is a flexible approach. It can vary from organizations to organizations with the point of view of what the regulators as well as the regulatory requirements, or what kind of a proactive approach the firm wants. So broadly speaking, the data governance gives a framework which enables fit for purpose data in a standardized, consistent, compliant, and efficient way. It is based on logical model where data policies and guidance are centrally managed. So if for a large organization, it is important that our policies or the regulations are centrally managed, are being governed by a set of qualified as well as experienced team, basis which we are able to deliver the policies and regulations which the firm can be implemented across our line of business. So that is how, that is where fit for purpose data comes into picture. Here I want to talk about the framework basically. So framework, as I've spoken about policy, standards, roles and responsibilities, and communication and training. So these forms the basis of any governance council being implemented, or any of the regulatory compliance pieces. So policies and standards which are being managed, reviewed, and updated by Data Governance Council or the Chief Data Officer will provide the base with regard to the roles and responsibilities. So you will assign a position to a data custodian or a data owner, or your business folks who understand the business as well as the technical side of the data architect. So those roles definition, those policies and standard, and then of course communication and training within the teams who are working on your data. So in the sense that they should treat data as an asset. It ultimately boils down to the piece that how a person is able to understand what critical activity he or she is doing. So for example, if someone is opening an account, he or she should understand the impact of incorrect input with regard to keying of a debit card name. How important is that? Or how important a SIN number is if it is incorrectly updated? What kind of impact it has on the customers? So understanding, so organization-wide training sessions, as well as bringing them up the speed, what is expected out of their roles, how to perform their, how to reduce the errors in their processes is also one of the critical role which is part of data governance as far as training is concerned. Along with that, of course, compliance with the regulatory and security requirements. So the privacy and the data security regulations are now applicable across the globe. So different banks along with different institutions have to comply with them. So you have to maintain your metadata or data about data in such a way that the data privacy elements, you are able to identify them from a given data set, so that each one, so whenever there is an audit or whenever there is a regulator reports required for a particular data domain or data set, you are able to define your privacy records among the same. Similarly, there are aspects to the accessibility of data as well as accuracy and monitoring of data. So when I say accessibility of the data, it should be that the data is accessible basis the roles defined by the organization, in the sense that whether a maker or a checker is well defined and the access has been differentiated, in the sense if there is a maker of activity or a person who is creating an account, and there should be a different checker for any transaction being posted for that particular account. So the role access based should also be handled. So this forms the basic framework or the scope of data governance, and you can see a lot of areas it gets covered. So as you can see, this slide basically presents the overall skeleton or the areas or the broader pillars of data governance. I have talked about the ownership or the role allocation of data stewardship, data policies and standards, which are the guidelines and the standardized format where the data gets governed. Apart from that, these are the other areas like data quality, metadata management, data lineage, and data cataloging. These are the other tools or these are the other pillars which basically forms the key pillars where you can measure as well as perform the fixes and your governance for data management, basically. Yeah, of course. So there are role-based personas being defined. So there will be a super user, or different types of users are being defined basis the complexity of the system, as well as what kind of data is being stored in that particular system. So if it is, for example, if it is a trade or a positions data, then you will have different accesses for a front-end market-driven team versus what the end date reconciliation or the trader is booking. So those accesses will be differ, and those users and the super users personas will be defined using data breaks and so on. I'm actually not covering the data privacy here, but that is how it happens and it gets managed. So I was talking about the broad pillars of data governance here. There are definitely areas like data sharing, data access, and data privacy, which I have not included for today's presentation. Otherwise, it will become too lengthy as well as boring. Anyways, going ahead, so I will start with data lineage. So data lineage basically is tracking the movement of data. So from one system where the data feeds or data is originating, for example, it could be a new client onboarding system where a new client is onboarded. And similarly, there will be a ATM system wherein a transaction is booked for a particular system. So tracking the movement of data, it is a recording aspect of how the data flows from one system or to the other. So the multiple hops gets covered through data lineage. And there are automated solutions also available now for very complex lineage. For example, in where I work currently in capital markets, there are sequence of client onboarding as well as trade being booked. So there will be pre-trade activity as well as post-trade activity, as well as your regulatory reporting. So a data might move from a client onboarded or a ATM transaction or a trade being booked into multiple phases or the life cycle of data to be finally consumed by the regulatory reports. So so I will give you an example of this. So this is an example. This actually represents how the data lineage happens or how the data lineage gets covered. So for example, A1 you can see is it could be a sourcing system. It could be a transaction system where a ATM transaction has happened. And the D2 is the reconciliation which gets reported to, for example, the MasterCards or the Visa cards, which the transaction is being reconciled at the end of the day. So you can see the multiple hops, the data will move from one system to the others. And to identify a particular source, this is called the data lineage. From D2 to A1, that is the data lineage which we track from the source to the final one which gets consumed. So, so this particular, if you see the hop between A1 to B, B to C, and that is how the schema gets defined from the schema table and column. So that becomes our data element particularly. And this helps us not only for debugging or resolving issues, but it also helps us in implementation of a change. For example, if there are new attributes or there is a change request from a regulator stating that we not only need the amount of the transaction, but also the currency of the transaction. In that case, if I go to the project manager, he will understand, basis the data lineage, what kind of effort is needed to implement this change, because it will get impacted on multiple systems if you see the data flow here. As well as it will be also important which teams will be required to implement this change, in the sense the testing will be required not only in A system, but B, C, and D systems as well, because they are downstream consumers. So this is how a data lineage works, and this brings the confidence to a person who is presenting the numbers at the end of the day, that my data is being sourced from a golden source, and my system, the authoritative system which I am building up the numbers, are being sourced accurately. So this is how it gets folded for data lineage. Yeah. Yeah, so the other pillar is metadata and metadata management. So metadata, when I say, is data about data. So for this example, if you could see that there is a card number, customer name, and the amount due. So this is a credit card statement, for example. So this information is available. And metadata basically tells us what exactly is the type of the data, in the sense what data type is there, the column details, what will be the length, the precision of that particular attribute, along with the table and the schema details of that particular data element. So this is basically, it provides the technical information as well as the business information. So for example, we might say this is a, so for a technical team or a data analyst, you might call this attribute as a due underscore amount. But business will call it differently, in the sense that they talk about it as in a business language or a layman language as a due amount, a basic due amount. It's not due underscore amount, which you will read or you will write an SQL query on. So the business information is also important when we interact with business and we are trying to explain them what exactly is a data quality issue or a data lineage issue. So it's important to document the business definitions and what particular data element brings to the catalog. So we have a technical definition, and I've given the examples of the technical definition for metadata along with business, and then there could be certain operational controls. When I say operational controls, it could be that for this particular field, there are certain checks or controls or validations which are already built in. So for your questions which you asked in the Excel, so for example, you will check for the null values. If there is a due amount, it has to have a value. It can't be a 0. It can't be null. So similarly, negative balance check. So those becomes the operational metadata of the data. So once we have this information on metadata, then it becomes important to implement data governance, that we bring it on the data catalog. So data catalog is one of the end state document which is being shared with both technical as well as business team before it gets implemented. So this is one of the important pillar where the metadata, once being maintained on the data catalog, we derive the critical data elements. So the first question which I asked in the opening slide, what is the health of your data, or what are your critical data elements? It boils down to that. So for certain teams, it could be the revenue, it could be the profit, or for some, it could be the risk parameters, whatever the final stakeholders you are facing. So whatever is driving your process, or whosoever is owning your system particularly, or driving the end result, the key data element will matter for him or her at the end of the day. So this is also done basis what kind of impact financial, regulatory, or business decisions is impacting, and this gets recorded into a data catalog, which serves as a Bible for or a holy book for the implementation managers or the people working both on the technical as well as business side. For example, it could be part of your data dictionary, it could be part of your interface agreements, it could be part of your SLAs. So that is how data catalog becomes a vital tool. Okay, so moving towards the last pillar. So if you remember, I was talking about all these pillars, and data quality is also one of the pillars. So these earlier tools will give us how, what is the state of our data, how we capture it, and what are the critical data elements. But ultimately, until unless we define or we work towards improving the data quality, it is of no use to implement a data governance, or we won't be able to achieve a data management standard until unless data quality management is in place. So how we do it is, these are the three areas or three subset of data quality. One being the control definitions. When I say control definition is, once we have identified the critical data elements, it is required how we can measure it, how we can standardize it for the assessment. In the sense, do we do a completeness check? Do we do an accuracy check? So when I say zip code is or a pin code is very important, or a postal code is very important for your logistics firm. So the postal code will become your critical data element. Therefore, you have to have those checks in place for postal code. So it could be that it is restricted to 6-digit, and it could have only a match of 3-digit and 3 numbers. So those kind of checks can be built in, and those are your control. It becomes your control definition. Then it becomes the other area would be how will you measure it. So again, measuring is you run these queries, these SQL queries or other laid down queries into your systems with regard to identify the gaps. So for example, we have built this control query for postal codes, which I am sticking to again. So it could be that 6 digits. So when you run those queries or the control checks or validations, you will note certain failures. So what kind of failures we are noting? So for example, out of 50,000 customers, we see a failure of 5,000 customers. So it is a fail record of almost 10%. So what kind of impact we see if for the delivery or the ground teams on the delivery front in case those postal codes get impacted. So that is how the data quality or the results you can connect the dots and measure. And that is how these measurement results will lead to issue management. Then comes how we can fix those issues at the source itself. Once we have identified that data lineage, for example, where the keystrokes of postal codes were incomplete, so how we can either have those controls inbuilt in system, or we can have a maker checker implement controls being implemented for those postal codes or for those customer names, so that these don't crop up again, or we will try to reduce those errors. So that is through issue management, data quality issue management. So I will follow this complete skeleton in the sense, for example, it depends upon your organization or what is your end product. So if, for example, I have told you it is that you are managing an ATM transaction machine. So for you, it might be that those balances are maintained, or there is no negative balance. So you will implement your checks or controls on the balances, and along with your card numbers. So it could vary from case to case basis. So again, it could vary for a small organization. It could be very specific critical data, and it could be, then those controls can be implemented on those. And most of these controls people do implement on day-to-day activities. So it could be in your Excels, it could be in your validations or reconciliations, which you do maybe manually, maybe system-driven. So for example, in ETL, so if a feed comes in, I think most of you will definitely look for the number of rows which gets populated, number of columns which are getting populated, and so on. So consistency checks are there. So those are the controls which are built in for those fields. And then in case there are interactions with businesses, and they will come back saying that these 2 fields are specifically missing or have been missing in the past as well. So you will implement those checks on those particular fields. So those will be your controls and validations. And it can be comprehensive. There are other dimensions to it, but that is how it comes out. So completeness, uniqueness, consistency, a lot of checks can be implemented. Yeah. So these are few of the examples which I have talked about. So data formats, you can implement data formats, you can implement the required field formats. You can do data types that a numeric value will be added only to a particular field and no characters or all. And then you can implement your pick list that you pick up a value so that it will reduce the option of incorrect data being inputted. So you can do that. And then validation rules that a field will have these many defined values only. And then duplicate checks. So for example, any column which will have a SIN number, it cannot duplicate. So you have to ensure those duplicate checks are inbuilt into system so that system reports those duplicate checks. Again, it depends upon the type of data you are implementing a duplicate check. For example, address could have a duplicate check. The duplicate check might fail for an address, sorry. because there could be multiple people living in the same building and they might all have an account in a particular branch. So a duplicate check can't be implemented there, but definitely for the likes of, as I said, SIN number, there could be mobile numbers or phone numbers. The duplicate checks can run there. So again, email IDs, those are the fields which you need to identify, discuss with business as well as the technical team to arrive on the controls you like to have on those particular data elements, and then it gets implemented and tested and implemented. Yeah, there are certain aspects to it in the sense that it brings a lot of things to platter which we normally in our normal days don't realize. Importance of data quality, data management is increasing. It's good to see, but at the same time, it is a long journey, and data governance is only provide the steps and steps to implement it. But again, it all depends upon how passionate you are and how you can evolve and work towards it.